you get vaccinated, you sit and wait for 15 minutes. It's normally shortly after having a vaccine that you could possibly have an effect where you might start to become dizzy. You could have an epileptic seizure. If you have a previous fever, having an immune response on top of that can give you that type of side effect. And the vaccine side effects that you can expect is that local reaction where you might have a little bit of a mild dull ache in your arm. Maybe you can't sleep on the side of that bed that night. You might have a little bit of an uncomfortable arm doing yoga or playing tennis. But this is a really mild reaction. In some people, you can have a fever, so your immune system starts to recognize that there's something foreign, and you could have a low-grade fever for maybe up to 3 days after the vaccine. And that's you trying to make that army of cells. So you don't get a payoff for free. So you can't have an army of cells and antibodies to fight a future infection without having your body see some danger signal. So if you had a vaccine and it had no side effect, that's actually a bad sign because it means that you're not ready to fight a future infection. So in the clinical trials, they are monitored for severe adverse reactions. So if there was toxicity from a vaccine, that's been monitored in the handful of people that are followed much more closely by clinicians. So these vaccines have already passed those stages. In a healthy young adult getting the vaccine, you'll have mild symptoms that may last for a day or two where you might need a Panadol or to not sleep on your side. But more than that, it could be that you have other effects going on. So in widespread vaccination programs before, we've seen extremely rare relationships with Guillain-Barré syndrome, with narcolepsy. We've seen some reports of Bell's palsy as partial facial paralysis, but it's very difficult because these are such incredibly rare events to relate them back to the vaccine directly. And some of these things can also happen spontaneously with an immune reaction. So Guillain-Barré syndrome is a really interesting immune-mediated neurological disorder. It was first identified back in like the 1970s when there was a widespread vaccination campaign for influenza. So once you vaccinated millions of people, you then got this signal of Guillain-Barré. But Guillain-Barré can happen from spontaneously. It can also happen from other virus infections. And it can happen with an immune response. And whether that immune response comes from an infection or vaccination, there is an increased risk, but it's incredibly rare. And it can also be self-resolving over a matter of months. But it's not necessarily something that's specifically related to a vaccine. If you don't have any vaccine side effects, I did say that that would mean that the vaccine didn't work, but I think that that's not quite true. It might be that you're so young, fit and healthy, you didn't really notice that you had a mild pain. You might not have made such a big side effect response because your body was able to handle it quite effectively. So I think that the side effects we can expect from the vaccine is a natural part of being vaccinated. If it doesn't happen to you that you get a mild pain in your arm or a mild fever or a headache, it might mean that, yes, you haven't made such an effective response, or it might mean that you have and your body is able to deal with that quite easily. So I think that what pains one person doesn't always pain the next person. We all have a different tolerance and threshold for what we perceive as a pain. So I think by only knowing if the vaccine response didn't work, you have to look at that response. The only way to know if the vaccine didn't work is to actually take your blood at baseline and then take it maybe 1 month later and compare the magnitude of the vaccine antibody response. Ben Cowling is doing a really large epidemiology study here where he's going to take blood samples. If people want to volunteer for that, that is being monitored here as to whether you made a vaccine response. Otherwise, it's a guesswork as to what really happened inside your body.